Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we turn to talking about the media's biased coverage of this ongoing health crisis, particularly their biased coverage state by state and governor by governor concerning how these crises are being dealt with and which ones are dealing with it the best. The media doesn't want to tell you the truth here because the truth is the Democrat and blue states are doing terrible. Their leaders are blowing it. They're doing the worst. They have the most cases, the most deaths. States like New York, Illinois, California, they're all suffering the worst because they have terrible leadership. They're locking things down more. They're doing bad things like Governor Cuomo in New York sending infected people into nursing homes, causing a big spread. All this stuff isn't being covered though because the Democrats are also running the mainstream media. So the mainstream media is covering for all these states. And in addition, they're not covering the good states that are doing extremely well. Today, we're talking about Florida and its governor DeSantis, who has actually spoken out and called the mainstream media out on this. He had an excellent video that went viral a few days ago where he called the media out for being totally biased about this. His state is doing pretty well, all things considered. In fact, Florida is doing so well, as he says later in this clip, the other people are coming to Florida because they're struggling. The New Yorkers are all coming to Florida because their state's so bad. They want to go to a safer state like Florida. And DeSantis calls this out perfectly. He has a beautiful tweet. We'll go ahead and go right into it. It's over here. Watchdog has this tweet. It says, after watching Governor DeSantis rip the media's coverage of Florida's handling of the virus, I thought I'd put together a thread of just how garbage that coverage was. That's great. That's going to be very interesting. So we're going to get more details on that bad coverage. But first, let's check out the video. Let's see what the governor has to say. Right here, he's standing with Mike Pence, the vice president, and he has some great words about how bad the media is.
About how Florida has the absolute best data. So any insinuation otherwise is just typical partisan narrative trying to be spun. And part of the reason is that because you got a lot of people in your profession who waxed poetically for weeks and weeks about how Florida was going to be just like New York. Wait 2 weeks, Florida's going to be next. Just like Italy, wait 2 weeks. Well, hell, we're 8 weeks away from that, and it hasn't happened.
Nice, very exciting, well-spoken. I like the way he's excited about this. He's defending himself. He's a good, God-fearing conservative right here, representing a great state. Florida gets a bad rap sometimes. I know there's some good jokes about Florida man, and there's a lot of crazy people here too. But really, I'm in Florida. I love it. It's a beautiful state. We're dealing with this as well as possible, especially for being such a big state. There's 20 million people in Florida, and that's very comparable to, say, New York, which just has a few million more. Even Texas has a lot like that, and as does California. California has way more, of course. They have 40 million or so. That's the biggest state. But still, it's a big high player. Florida's on the top, and for some reason they just seem to be handling this situation better. And I don't think it's just a coincidence. I don't think it's just because we had good luck. It's because of people like Ron DeSantis. It's because of people like the Governor DeSantis here. He's doing great. He's got a good system. He's working with his conservative principles, his values, the Republican Party. This is why our states are doing better, and that's also why these other states are doing worse. The media doesn't want that to happen though. They want Florida to fail. That's why they haven't been very fair covering them, because it's obvious that New York is failing. New York has it the worst. It's like one of the worst cases in all the world. It's very terrible, and I'm not excited about that. That's bad, and that's why we're calling them out and calling out Governor Cuomo there and the terrible Democrats that have ruined that state. They need to stop voting them in. That's the key issue here. And it's also showing that places that change and vote in Republicans like Florida, they're succeeding and doing really well. And that's why it's great to see this governor here call out the media and put them on blast, because they said many weeks ago Florida was going to be like New York, and right now it's not even close.
We have a lower death rate than the Acela Corridor, D.C., everyone up there. We have a lower death rate than the Midwest, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. But even in our region, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida has the lower death rate. And I was the #1 landing spot from tens of thousands of people leaving the #1 hot zone in the world to come to my state. So we've succeeded.
Yes, you have succeeded. Congratulations. Glad that he could be confident and speak out at this news conference, at this presser. And what he just mentioned there, the thousands of people are typically coming from New York. Other infected places have tried to flee to places like Florida too, but New York is a known pipeline. Like New York and Florida have this long-standing connection where people tend to fly into Miami and stuff like that, between Miami and New York. New York is a colder state, so a lot of them will vacation here and stuff too, as do many people on the East Coast. They come to Florida for the beautiful beaches and stuff like that. And in this case, they're coming to Florida for the safer environment, for the cleaner system, for the more well-run crisis response. Things are looking better here. So they're fleeing these Democratic states, coming to a more conservative one. And what I say about that is, and I've considered making a whole video about this premise, but the one problem and the one thing that's really frustrating is a lot of these Democrats are actually considering leaving these bad states. California has a lot of people fleeing too. People want to leave there. People want to leave Michigan as well. Illinois, all these Democratic states are having people flee them. But the problem is when they flee, they try to take their Democratic policies with them. They take these politics that ruined their previous state and they want to ruin their new one. And it just doesn't make sense. It's like this system failed you. Quit electing Democrats. And then if you move somewhere else, don't go and elect Democrats there. It's like taking a failing system with you. It's like, you left that place for a reason. Why would you want to bring it to this new place and ruin it too? It doesn't make sense, but Democrats typically don't make sense. And this is also another very common strategy for them because their version of immigration and the way they want to conduct it is a similar thing too. A lot of these immigrants come from South America, Mexico, other places down below our southern border, and they typically try and bring their bad politics this way too. They bring their socialism, they bring their corruption, they start voting for liberals and Democrats here. But in a lot of ways, that liberalism ruined their previous countries too, especially places like Venezuela and other socialist nations in South America. And the fact that those people want to come here and bring their failed systems to America as they immigrate, it just doesn't make sense. And it's the same problem we were talking about with people coming from blue states and moving to red ones and trying to move their politics there. That's kind of what's been happening actually in Texas a lot. Texas is a kind of swing state, a purple state, if you will. It's been going back and forth for a while, but eventually it's on its way to become full-fledged Democrat because so many liberals have moved there to flee these other places and they've brought their politics, and now they're going to ruin Texas. And I don't want that to happen to Florida. I don't want that to happen anywhere. In fact, I think we should be turning these blue states to red ones instead of going the other way around and kind of spreading this disease of liberalism.
And I think that people just don't want to recognize it because it challenges their narrative, it challenges their assumption, so they got to try to find a boogeyman. Maybe it's that there are black helicopters circling the Department of Health. If you believe that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell you.
Last question.
Our data.
Pretty good ending. A little bit of a zinger there. Well put by the governor. I'm glad to have him as the governor and glad to see that the state's doing well and doing as good as you can. Granted, we're dealing with a bad story, a bad crisis. No one's going to be perfect. There's no great way to win. There's no real winner here. We're not competing. That was something that was put forward at Trump actually when he said that the United States overall is doing better and has more coverage and better stats than the rest of the world. We have more testing and stuff, and people called him out, try to call him out for being competitive, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, as it is not a bad thing for these states to compete with each other, trying to do better. Everyone should be trying to do better, but at the same time, we are all having some suffering. It is a bad story, so remember that too, and just note that we're all sad and we want this to be better for everyone. We don't want anyone to die, but that's obvious. That's enough said about that. Let's get to this watchdog and the biased coverage here. He's said this thread's going to get into it, and here's the thing that he says next. He says, we all remember the media saying Florida's reopening would kill people, but when data started coming out, it showed cases in Florida weren't skyrocketing after reopening. So then the media found a new narrative. Actually, the data is wrong. Florida is covering up how bad it is. So they went from saying the cases would skyrocket when we reopened to saying, oh, the data is wrong, someone's lying. So they basically just believe what they want to believe. That's common for Democrats. It's kind of like what they did with the election in 2016. They said they would accept the results. They actually were afraid conservatives wouldn't accept the results, but then when Trump won, they wouldn't accept them, and they said everyone was cheating. And it's what's going on here too. They're just kind of never satisfied. There's only one problem. DeSantis told the media today Jones was actually fired for insubordination. She isn't a scientist. An actual scientist told her she was wrong. Oh, and she's being investigated for cyber stalking and harassment. So this is about the story. There was like a bad person in his administration. I remember hearing some kind of slanted story about this, and he's kind of explained that away. Yeah, you read the last part right. Jones was arrested for revenge porn in 2019. Reporters could have verified this through public record searches, but they didn't even bother to look into her background. They already had a narrative. So they didn't want to they wanted to believe this girl because she had the story they wanted. It was kind of like trying to be a negative story about Florida and how they're running things, but it turns out she was a fake. She's been arrested for bad lies and stuff like this before. Among those who uncritically shared Jones' claims, 35 retweets from Washington Post reporter Hamza Shaban, NBC News. Florida official says she was ousted for refusing to censor data. This is the headline I saw somewhere a few days ago, and I knew that was questionable too. And this was just an attempt, and that's why it even came up. It was an attempt at slandering Florida. They don't want Florida to do well because it has a conservative leader, someone who is in line with someone like President Trump, who they hate. So that's why they made this fake news story saying she got ousted for refusing to censor data. No, she got ousted for being insubordinate, like this guy says up here. She also had active criminal charges, cyber stalking, cyber harassment. So she was a bad egg that got out for a good reason. But the media wanted to spin it, so they believed her little cyber censorship story, and they wanted to believe it. She put that out there probably knowing they would take the bait. Here, Hamzin takes a bait here. He says, Rebecca Jones said that her removal was not voluntary. She was ordered to censor some data. So we've got these big league reporters, Washington Post, NBC News, kind of behind the fake news story, trying to slander Florida. And that's why people like the governor just went off on them. Florida's getting a bad rap, and it's similar to, again, like what we get with Trump stuff and with conservatives. Anytime the media is totally biased against us, they're terrible, bad actors who are just not to be trusted with anything. 2 states that opened early question over public access. Florida ousts top data scientist. So this is them saying that data scientist was kicked out, and then that was something they said that wasn't even a scientist really. It was just the media making stuff up. They like to hide behind that science label, as we talked about in other videos. They try to act like they're the party of science. They say science like, oh, if I say scientist, if this is a doctor, that means everything is right. Like that means they're, if you want to be against science, and I know that kind of sounds bad. Like it sounds like, oh, we're anti-science. That's what they want to set up though. They want to set up that kind of paradigm where it's like, oh, we're the science party, so if you're against us, you're against science. But that's not true. Like conservatives do science too. We understand it. We have scientists and people doing research. Like they don't have a monopoly on that, even though they pretend to. Here's MSNBC Ari saying Trump's allies may be shielding virus data from the public as a kind of disinformation campaign. In Florida, the virus data chief was removed after being told reportedly to censor information. So again, sharing that fake news story that they love to get this story out there, and it's because they want to slander these states, and it's like them playing cover for the real problem, which is the Democratic states that are failing. They're not talking about Cuomo. We already said how Cuomo sent in infected people into nursing homes, causing a big scare, a bunch more people to get cases. We have bad things going on in other states like Michigan, which has people protesting their governor. California has more lockdowns through August. These are the places that are really failing, but the media is going after Florida, which is one of the places that's doing better. Doesn't make sense to me. Let's see what this clip says.
New questions about how Trump's allies may be shielding coronavirus data from the public as a kind of a disinformation campaign while dealing with the reopening debates. In Florida, the virus data chief was actually removed from the job after being told, reportedly, to censor information.
This guy is way over the top and dramatic. And he says reportedly. I think you should say like supposedly or not really. This didn't happen. You're fake news. It says here this type of behavior would make the central governments of Russia and China blush. Just kind of commenting on how they manipulate information over there. This is kind of communist Russian style propaganda. Them going against things, them kind of controlling the news, not really giving you information, just kind of spinning stuff and lying and making stuff up. And I think we have enough information here. You guys can see the point. Florida's getting a bad rap, even though it's doing well. The governor defended the state really, really properly. The media should be ashamed of themselves, and we should all keep notice and keep an eye on what's going on. That wraps things up. Thanks for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below. Tell me what you think about Florida, about its governor, about the media going against them, and why they're lying about Florida while also covering up things that happen in Democratic states. Until next time, make sure you also leave a like on this video, and have a great day, everyone.